The Ghosts of Vågsøy, December 27th, 1941. 03:48 hours, Vågsøy Island, Norway. Obergefreiter Klaus Ritter's breath forms clouds in the freezing North Atlantic air as he paces the wooden dock, his Mauser K98K rifle slung across his shoulder. The 22-year-old sentry from Hamburg has pulled guard duty for the third consecutive night, watching over the fish oil factories that fuel the Wehrmacht's glycerin production. Behind him, the coastal village of South Vågsøy sleeps under a blanket of darkness so complete that Ritter can barely see his own boots on the frost-covered planks. The sea is calm. Too calm. Ritter pauses mid-step, his ears straining against the silence. In his 5 months stationed on this god-forsaken rock jutting from the Norwegian coast, he's learned to trust his instincts. Something feels wrong. The normal sounds, the gentle lap of water against the pier, the distant cry of seabirds, seem muted, swallowed by an oppressive quiet that makes the hair on his neck stand rigid. He unslings his rifle, working the bolt as quietly as possible. The metallic click echoes across the harbor, absurdly loud in the stillness. Ritter scans the black water, seeing nothing but the faint shimmer of starlight on gentle swells. His standing orders are clear. Any suspicious activity warrants immediate alarm. But what is he supposed to report? A feeling? Hauptmann Weber would have him scrubbing latrines for a week if he raised the garrison over nothing more than nerves. Then he sees it, or rather he doesn't see it. He senses movement where there should be none. A darker patch of black against the obsidian sea, perhaps 50 meters offshore. Ritter blinks hard, convinced his eyes are playing tricks. When he looks again, the shadow has moved closer, much closer. Was some Teufel, he whispers, raising his rifle. His finger finds the trigger just as a hand, impossibly strong, impossibly silent, clamps over his mouth from behind. The rifle is torn from his grasp before he can fire. Ritter tries to scream, to struggle, but another hand locks around his throat. His last conscious thought before darkness claims him is disbelief. How did anyone get behind me? The commando who neutralized Ritter lowers the German's unconscious body to the dock without making a sound. Captain John Durnford Slater, commanding officer of No. 3 Commando, watches from the lead landing craft as his men flow onto the pier like water, their rubber-soled boots making no more noise than falling snow. Behind him, 5 more boats glide through the harbor, their muffled oars cutting the water with practiced precision. Each craft carries 20 men armed with Thompson submachine guns, fighting knives, and enough explosives to send half of South Vågsøy to the bottom of the Ulvesund. Durnford Slater checks his luminous watch. 0351 hours. 9 minutes until HMS Kenya and the destroyers of the covering force open fire on the German positions above the town. 9 minutes to get 150 men ashore and into position for Operation Archery, the first major combined operations raid designed to show Hitler that nowhere on his Atlantic wall is safe. The 31-year-old captain feels his pulse quicken, not with fear, but with the electric anticipation that precedes action. His men have trained for 8 months for this moment, perfecting the art of silent approach until they could move through darkness like wraiths. On the northern edge of the harbor, Lieutenant George Herbert's section reaches the first warehouse complex. Through the grimy windows, Herbert can see the silhouettes of German soldiers playing cards by lantern light, completely unaware that death has arrived at their doorstep. He signals to Corporal Peter Young, who nods and begins placing explosive charges against the building's support pillars. Every movement is choreographed, rehearsed 100 times on similar structures back in Scotland. Young works with the focused intensity of a surgeon, his fingers never fumbling despite the cold that has turned his hands nearly numb. Inside the warehouse, Gefreiter Otto Braun tosses his cards onto the makeshift table and announces his victory with a grin. His 3 companions groan in mock despair. Braun always seems to win at scat, though they suspect he cheats. The usual good-natured argument about card counting is just beginning when Braun holds up his hand for silence. "Did you hear that?" he asks. His friends look at him quizzically. "Hear what?" Schütze-Miller asks, reaching for his cigarettes. Braun stands, moving toward the window. He can't explain what caught his attention, perhaps a faint scraping sound, or maybe just the same paranoid instinct that gripped Ritter moments before his capture. He presses his face against the cold glass, peering into the darkness outside. For several seconds, he sees nothing. Then his blood runs cold. There, not 10 meters from the window, a figure is crouched in the shadows, and it's looking directly at him. December 27, 1941, 0354 hours, South Vågsøy, Norway. Bronn's mouth opens to shout a warning, but the words die in his throat as the figure outside brings up what looks like a Thompson submachine gun. Time seems to fracture. Bronn is diving away from the window, his hands grasping for the rifle he left leaning against the wall. Muller is halfway out of his chair, confusion written across his face. The other two soldiers are frozen, their card game suspended in the heartbeat before hell arrives. The window explodes inward in a shower of glass and splintered wood. Lieutenant Herbert comes through in a controlled roll, his Thompson already blazing. The close-quarters weapon tears through the warehouse interior with devastating effect. Tracer rounds, every fifth bullet loaded with phosphorus, draw brilliant orange lines through the darkness, transforming the space into a nightmare of light and shadow. Muller goes down first, 3 rounds catching him across the chest before he can even stand. The other card players scatter, one managing to grab his rifle before Corporal Young crashes through the door behind Herbert, his Sten gun adding to the cacophony. Bronn makes it to his weapon, fingers closing around the wooden stock. He's bringing the Mauser up when Herbert's next burst stitches across the wall above his head, forcing him to drop and roll behind a stack of fish oil barrels. The acrid smell of cordite mixes with the warehouse's permanent stench of fish and machine oil. Bronn's ears ring from the gunfire in the enclosed space. His training screams at him to return fire, but every time he tries to rise, another burst from the commandos pins him down. Outside, the carefully orchestrated silence of Operation Archery's approach phase shatters like the warehouse window. The gunfire acts as a signal flare to the entire German garrison. In the barracks overlooking the harbor, Hauptmann Weber bolts upright in his bed, still half asleep but recognizing the distinctive report of American submachine guns. British Commandos. The thought crystallizes with terrifying clarity. He's pulling on his boots and shouting orders before he's fully conscious, his Luger already in his hand. But Captain Durnford Slater knows that surprise once lost must be replaced with overwhelming violence. He raises his flare pistol and fires a green star into the pre-dawn sky. The signal is instant and unmistakable. From the darkness of Ulvesund Strait, HMS Kenya's 6-inch guns roar to life. The heavy cruiser, positioned 3 miles offshore, unleashes a broadside that turns night into day. Shells scream overhead, their passage creating a sound like tearing canvas magnified 1,000 times. They impact on the ridgeline above South Vågsøy with earth-shaking force, targeting the German coastal artillery positions that intelligence has identified as the primary threat. The ground beneath Corporal Peter Young's feet trembles as the naval bombardment begins. He's planted the last of his explosive charges and is unspooling detonator wire as fast as his half-frozen fingers will allow. Inside the warehouse, Herbert and his section are still engaged with the survivors of the card game. Young can hear the sharp crack of Mauser rifles mixing with the deeper bark of British weapons. He looks up at the warehouse, calculating blast radius, checking that all his men are clear of the danger zone. "Fire in the hole," Young bellows, his voice barely audible over the ongoing naval bombardment. He twists the handle on the detonator. The warehouse seems to lift entirely off its foundation for a surreal moment, light blazing from every crack and seam. Then the structure comes apart, walls blowing outward in a cloud of splintered wood and pulverized stone. The fish oil barrels inside ignite, adding balls of orange flame to the explosion. The blast wave knocks Young flat despite his distance from the charge. Inside, Bronn has perhaps 2 seconds to comprehend what's happening. He sees the walls bulging inward, sees his last remaining comrade's eyes go wide with understanding. Then the concussion wave hits like a physical blow from an invisible giant. Bronn is hurled through the air, slamming into support beams that are themselves disintegrating. His last thought before unconsciousness is that these British soldiers fight like demons, not men. Lieutenant Herbert crashes through what remains of a side wall, carried by the explosion's force. He hits the ground hard, rolling instinctively, coming up with his Thompson still in hand. His ears are ringing so badly that the world seems to move in eerie silence despite the chaos erupting around him. He can see the muzzle flashes from his weapon, but can't hear the shots. His section is emerging from the ruins, pulling themselves from debris. Miraculously, they're all still moving. Above the burning warehouse, Hauptmann Weber reaches the command post to find it in absolute chaos. His radio operator is trying desperately to raise the coastal artillery positions, but the only response is static, mixed with the thunder of ongoing shell fire. Through the observation slit, Weber can see the harbor below, and what he sees makes his blood run cold. The docks are crawling with British Commandos, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. It's impossible to tell in the confusion of fire and darkness. "Get me Kriegsmarine headquarters in Bergen," Weber snaps. "Tell them we're under attack by a major commando force. We need reinforcements, air support, everything they can." His words are cut off as a shell from HMS Kenya's secondary armament strikes the hillside 50 meters away. The command post shakes, dust raining from the ceiling. Weber grabs the radio handset himself. "This is Strong Point Molloy. We are under heavy attack. I repeat, we are under." On the southern approach to the town, Troop Sergeant Jack Nicholson leads his section through the residential area, where most of the Norwegian civilians live. The houses here are dark, shutters closed, families huddling inside as the battle rages around them. Nicholson's orders are explicit: minimize civilian casualties, identify German positions, secure the approach to the herring factory complex. The 28-year-old from Liverpool moves with the practiced ease of a man who's seen combat before. He was at Dunkirk, one of the lucky ones who made it off the beaches. A door opens ahead, and Nicholson's Thompson comes up instantly. A Norwegian woman stands in the doorway, her face pale with terror, a small child clutched to her chest. Nicholson lowers his weapon, placing a finger to his lips. The woman's eyes are wide, but she nods understanding and retreats inside, closing the door. Nicholson moves on, knowing that within hours this raid will become legend among the Norwegian resistance. Tonight, they're showing the occupied territories that the British haven't forgotten them. At the harbor's edge, Captain Durnford Slater watches his assault plan unfold with grim satisfaction. The warehouses are burning, lighting the battlefield better than any flares could. His men are pushing inland, meeting stiffening resistance now that the Germans have recovered from their initial shock. Tracer fire crisscrosses the darkness in both directions. He can hear the distinctive bark of German MG-34 machine guns opening up from defensive positions. The easy part, the silent approach, is over. Now comes the real work. December 27, 1941, 0408 hours, South Vågsøy, Norway. Sergeant Major Patrick Daly presses his back against the stone wall of a fisherman's cottage as bullets chip away at the corner above his head. The MG-34 that has his section pinned is firing from a fortified position inside the Ferda Hotel, 200 meters up the main street. Every few seconds, the German gunner sends another burst downrange, the weapon's impossibly high rate of fire, 900 rounds per minute, turning the cobblestone street into a killing ground. Daly has already lost one man, Private Harrison, who made the mistake of breaking cover too soon. Harrison lies motionless 15 meters away, his blood pooling black in the firelight. "Covering fire," Daly shouts, and immediately 4 Thompsons open up on the hotel's second-story windows. The volume of fire forces the German gunner to duck, buying precious seconds. Daly doesn't waste them. He's up and sprinting, his boots hammering against the stones, lungs burning as he zigzags toward a wrecked fishing boat that offers better cover. He can feel as much as hear the MG-34 resume firing, rounds cracking past his head with that distinctive supersonic snap that means they're missing by inches. He dives behind the boat just as a burst tears through the space where his torso was a heartbeat before. His shoulder slams into frozen wood, sending a jolt of pain down his arm. But he's alive and 30 meters closer to the hotel. Corporal Davies materializes beside him, having made the same suicidal dash. The younger man's face is slick with sweat despite the sub-zero temperature. "That bastard's got the entire street covered, Sarge," Davies gasps. We need a flanking approach or we'll be here until the bloody Luftwaffe shows up. Daly nods, his mind racing through options. Standard infantry doctrine says call for support, wait for armor or heavy weapons. But there is no armor on this frozen Norwegian island, no time to wait. The raid is timed down to the minute. They have perhaps 90 more before the covering force withdraws and leaves them stranded. He looks left, toward a row of wooden buildings that run parallel to the main street. Take 3 men through those structures, he orders. Get above and behind that position. When I hear you engage, we push straight up the middle. Davies grins despite the circumstances. And if we don't make it through? Daly's expression hardens. Then we push anyway because every minute we're stuck here is a minute Fritz has to organize a proper defense. Davies nods once, then taps 3 men from the section. They disappear into the maze of buildings like smoke, their rubber-soled boots making no sound. Daly checks his watch, 411 hours. He gives Davies 5 minutes. 3 blocks north, Lieutenant Herbert's section has fought their way to the German administrative building, a stolid concrete structure that houses the garrison's quartermaster and supply records. The resistance here is fierce. Wehrmacht soldiers are firing from every window, and someone inside has a Panzerfaust, the new anti-tank weapon that can turn a man into red mist if it connects. Herbert's men are taking cover behind a stone wall when the first Panzerfaust round streaks past, missing Corporal Young by less than a meter before detonating against a house behind them. The explosion is tremendous, far larger than anything the caliber should produce. "Christ!" Young shouts, his face white. "What the hell was that?" Herbert knows exactly what it was. Intelligence briefings described these new German weapons, shaped charge warheads designed to punch through tank armor. Against infantry in the open, they're devastating. "Stay low and keep moving," he orders. They can't reload those things quickly. It's a half-truth at best, but his men need confidence more than perfect information right now. Private Tommy Greer, a 19-year-old from Glasgow, scrambles along the wall until he reaches a drainage ditch that runs toward the building's blind side. He doesn't ask permission, doesn't wait for orders. He simply goes, crawling through half-frozen mud with his Thompson slung across his back. Herbert sees him moving and wants to call him back, but the kid is already committed. Sometimes in combat, audacity succeeds where caution fails. Herbert signals for suppressing fire, and his section unleashes everything they have at the administrative building's windows. Inside, Feldwebel Ernst Hoffmann struggles to reload his Panzerfaust while bullets hammer the concrete around his position. The 32-year-old career soldier has been in the Wehrmacht since before the war, seeing action in Poland and France. He knows the sounds of battle intimately, knows how to read the flow of combat, and what he's reading now terrifies him. These British Commandos fight with a ferocity and coordination that the French never showed, pressing forward despite casualties, exploiting every weakness. The initial attack, those silent boats, the way they took the harbor without a single alarm being raised, was like something from a ghost story. Hoffmann gets the Panzerfaust loaded and peers around the window frame looking for a target. The British are keeping low behind that stone wall, making themselves difficult targets. He's about to fire blind, hoping to catch someone in the blast radius, when movement catches his eye. One of the commandos is in the drainage ditch, almost at the building's foundation. Hoffmann swings the Panzerfaust toward this new threat, but the weapon is unwieldy, designed for tanks, not individual soldiers. Tommy Greer reaches the building's base and pulls a Mills bomb from his webbing. The grenade is heavy, reassuring in his palm. His hands are shaking, from cold or adrenaline, he can't tell, but his training takes over. Pull the pin, count to 2, throw. The grenade arcs through a ground floor window with all the accuracy of a cricket player. Greer is already diving away when it detonates. The explosion inside the concrete structure is amplified, contained by the walls. Glass and debris blast outward. Men scream. Hoffmann is thrown backward by the concussion, his Panzerfaust clattering across the floor. His ears ring. Blood runs from his nose. Through the smoke and confusion, he sees British Commandos pouring through the shattered windows and doors. They move through the building like a well-oiled machine, each man covering the next, weapons up and ready. Hoffmann tries to rise, reaching for his Luger, but a Thompson muzzle appears in his face, held by a young soldier with Glasgow written all over his features. "Don't," Tommy Greer says, his finger tight on the trigger. Hoffman slowly raises his hands. Around them, the sounds of fighting continue. Gunfire, explosions, the screams of wounded men. But in this small moment, in this room thick with cordite smoke, the battle has ended for Ernst Hoffman. He's one of the lucky ones, and some part of him knows it. Back at the Ferda Hotel, Daly's watch reads 04:16 hours. Davies should be in position by now. As if answering his thought, a burst of Sten gunfire erupts from the building adjacent to the hotel. Davies has found his angle. The MG-34 that has held the street for the last 8 minutes tries to traverse toward this new threat, its barrel swinging away from Daly's position. "Now!" Daly roars, and he's up and running, his entire section following. They charge up the main street in a ragged line, weapons firing from the hip, screaming like banshees. The German gunner tries to swing back to engage them, but Davies' section is pouring fire into his position. The MG-34 falls silent. Daly hits the hotel's front door at a full run, his shoulder driving through wood weakened by shell fire. He tumbles into a lobby that reeks of cordite and blood. A German soldier rises from behind an overturned desk, rifle in hand. Daly's Thompson speaks first, 3-round center mass, and the soldier crumples. The ground floor of the hotel becomes a close-quarters nightmare. Germans and British mix in a swirling melee, too close for aimed fire, fighting with knives and rifle butts in desperate fury. Daly empties his Thompson into a hallway where shadows move, then draws his fighting knife as a Wehrmacht soldier charges from a side room. They grapple, crashing into walls, the German's hands locked around Daly's wrist, trying to force the knife away. They're face to face, breath mingling, and Daly can see that his opponent is barely 20, can see the fear in the boy's eyes. Daly drives his knee into the German's groin, breaks the grip, and the knife finds its mark. The soldier gasps, eyes going wide with shock and pain. Daly lowers him to the floor almost gently, then moves on. There's no time for reflection, no space for mercy or guilt. Those luxuries are for men who aren't fighting for their lives in a burning Norwegian hotel at 4 a.m. By 04:25 hours, the Ferda Hotel is secure. Daly stands in what remains of the lobby, breathing hard, his uniform soaked with sweat and other men's blood. Around him, his section is checking rooms, securing prisoners, tending to the wounded. The MG-34 position that held them for nearly 20 minutes has been neutralized. Davies' flanking maneuver worked perfectly, but the cost shows in the faces of his men, in the body bags they'll need, in the screams of the German wounded. Outside, South Vogsoy burns. The raid is entering its second phase, and dawn is still 2 hours away. December 27, 1941, 04:42 hours, South Vogsoy, Norway. Captain Durnford Slater studies the burning town through his binoculars, mentally tallying objectives secured and casualties mounting. His command post, a commandeered fishing warehouse near the harbor, has become a nexus of organized chaos. Runners arrive every few minutes with reports from the forward sections. Warehouse complex secured, administrative building taken, hotel cleared. But the big prize, the primary target that justifies the entire operation, still remains in German hands. The Ferda herring oil factory, sitting on the northern edge of town like a medieval fortress, its production vital to German glycerin manufacturing, and therefore to their entire explosives industry. "Sir, message from Lieutenant Herbert," announces Lance Corporal Winters, breathless from running. He's reached the factory perimeter but reports heavy resistance. Germans have fortified the interior. He's requesting explosives and additional men. Durnford Slater doesn't hesitate. Tell him he's getting both, and tell him we've got maybe 45 minutes before German reinforcements start arriving from Molloy. That factory needs to go up before we withdraw. He turns to his second-in-command, Major Jack Churchill, a man who earned his nickname Mad Jack by carrying a longbow and broadsword into combat, much to the bemusement of conventional officers. Churchill stands near a makeshift map table, his anachronistic weapons somehow seeming perfectly natural in the medieval brutality of this close-quarters battle. "Jack, take your troop and reinforce Herbert. I want that factory reduced to rubble by 0530 hours. Churchill grins beneath his thick mustache. Consider it done. Shall I play them a tune on the pipes to speed things along? He's only half joking. Churchill's bagpipes have accompanied more than one commando assault. Save the performance for when we're back aboard ship, Durnford Slater replies dryly. Right now I need demolition work, not a concert. Churchill nods, gathers his men, and disappears into the smoke-filled streets. Durnford Slater returns his attention to the tactical situation. The raid has gone remarkably well despite the loss of complete surprise. German casualties are heavy, their coordination shattered by the speed and violence of the commando assault. But the defenders are recovering, establishing strong points, making the British pay for every meter gained. At the factory perimeter, Lieutenant Herbert crouches behind an overturned rail car, assessing the fortress-like structure before him. The Ferda factory is a massive brick building, 3 stories tall with small barred windows, perfect for defensive fire. The Germans inside, he estimates at least 30 soldiers plus factory workers who may be armed, have turned it into a strong point. 2 of his men are already down, caught by a sniper firing from the factory's 3rd floor. That sniper has the entire approach covered, making a frontal assault suicidal. There, Corporal Young says, pointing to the factory's eastern wall where a loading door hangs partially open. If we can get to that entrance, we're inside their perimeter. Herbert nods slowly. Getting to that door means crossing 40 meters of open ground under direct observation from multiple firing positions. It's the kind of movement that gets men killed in job lots. But there's no alternative. The factory must be destroyed, and they're running out of time. Tommy, Herbert says to Private Greer, who's proven himself remarkably capable since the assault began, think you can make that run? Greer looks at the killing ground, calculates angles and distances with the unconscious mathematics that keeps soldiers alive. Aye, sir, but I'll need covering fire that would wake the dead. Herbert almost smiles. That, Private Greer, is something we can arrange. What follows is a masterpiece of coordinated suppression. Every weapon in Herbert's section, Thompson's, Sten's, even a captured German MG-34, opens fire simultaneously on the factory windows. The volume of fire is staggering, hundreds of rounds per minute hammering into brick and wood, forcing the defenders to duck below windowsills or risk decapitation. Tracer rounds draw orange lines through the pre-dawn darkness, setting small fires where they impact. The noise is physically painful, a continuous roar that drowns out thought. Into this maelstrom runs Tommy Greer. He sprints low and fast, his Thompson bouncing against his chest, legs pumping. 20 meters, 30. He can see muzzle flashes from the factory windows as Germans risk exposure to fire at him. Bullets kick up concrete fragments around his feet. His lungs burn. 40 meters feels like 40 miles. Then he's at the loading door, pressing himself against the wall, gasping for air, somehow miraculously untouched. Inside the factory, Lieutenant Carl Fisher watches in disbelief as the British soldier makes it across the open ground. Fisher commands the factory's defense, 32 Wehrmacht soldiers and 18 armed factory workers, with ammunition and defensive positions that should make this building nearly impregnable. But these British commandos fight with a recklessness that borders on insanity. Who runs across open ground under direct fire? Who charges machine gun positions with submachine guns and grenades? The loading door, Fisher shouts. Someone get to the loading door. But his men are pinned by the incredible volume of British fire. Every time a German soldier moves toward the door, Thompson rounds force him back. Fisher realizes with growing horror that the British aren't trying to suppress his entire position. They're creating a corridor, keeping his men away from that one critical point. And now more British soldiers are making the run, exploiting the path the first man blazed. Tommy Greer kicks open the loading door just as Corporal Young slides in beside him, followed by 3 more commandos. They're inside the factory proper now, in a cavernous space that reeks of fish oil and industrial chemicals. Massive storage tanks loom overhead, connected by a maze of pipes and catwalks. The lighting is dim, creating deep shadows perfect for ambush. Spread out, Young whispers. Watch for... The German counterattack comes from 3 directions simultaneously. Fisher's men have been waiting, letting the British enter the trap. Gunfire erupts in the confined space, muzzle flashes strobing like lightning. A commando beside Greer goes down immediately, clutching his leg. Another returns fire, his Thompson blazing. Greer dives behind a support column as bullets ricochet off metal tanks, creating sparks that could ignite the volatile chemicals surrounding them. One spark in the wrong place and the entire factory becomes a bomb. Young realizes the danger instantly. Cease fire, you idiots, you'll blow us all to hell. The commandos stop shooting, but the Germans don't. They either don't understand English or don't care about the danger. Bullets continue to ping off metal surfaces, each impact a potential ignition source. Young makes a split-second decision that's either brilliant or suicidal. He pulls a Mills bomb from his webbing, holds it up where the Germans can see it, and shouts in his best German, "Granit, stoppen Sie oder wir alle sterben." The factory falls silent. Young's German is terrible, his accent atrocious, but the message is unmistakable. Grenade, stop, or we all die. For a frozen moment, British and German soldiers stare at each other across the factory floor, both sides realizing they're standing in a powder keg with dozens of lit matches. Then Lieutenant Fisher does something that will haunt him for the rest of his life. He orders his men to cease fire. "Don't shoot," Fisher calls out in heavily accented English. "We understand, no shooting." He steps into view, hands slightly raised, his Luger pointed at the ceiling. His men follow his lead, emerging from their defensive positions but keeping their weapons ready. It's not a surrender, not exactly, more like a mutual acknowledgement that continuing the firefight will kill everyone present, regardless of who wins. Outside, Major Jack Churchill arrives with his troop just as the shooting inside the factory stops. The sudden silence is more alarming than gunfire would be. Churchill draws his sword, an act that would be comical if not for the bodies littering the approach and the burning buildings casting everything in hellish orange light. What's happened? Why have they stopped firing? No one has an answer. Churchill makes a decision. Right then, we're going in. If our lads are in trouble, we extract them. If they've taken the factory, we blow it. Either way, we're not standing about. December 27th, 1941, 04:58 hours, Ferda Factory, South Vågsøy, Norway. Inside the factory, the standoff holds like a drawn breath. Corporal Young keeps the Mills bomb visible, his thumb on the pin, while Tommy Greer and the other commandos maintain firing positions behind the storage tanks. Across the floor, Lieutenant Fisher's Wehrmacht soldiers mirror them, weapons ready but not aimed, everyone acutely aware that a single shot could cascade into catastrophe. The only sounds are the drip of leaking pipes and the distant thunder of naval gunfire as HMS Kenya continues pounding German positions on the ridgeline. Fisher breaks the silence first. "You are British Commandos, yes?" His English is careful, practiced. Young nods slowly, still holding the grenade. "No, 3 Commando. And you're going to let us wire this factory for demolition, or we're all going up together." Fisher's laugh is bitter. "You would die just to destroy a herring oil factory? This is madness." Young's expression doesn't waver. "This factory produces glycerin for German explosives. Every bomb that falls on London, every shell that kills British soldiers, your factory helps make that possible. So yes, mate, I'd die to take it down. Question is, would you die to save it?" The logic is brutal and undeniable. Fisher looks at his men, young faces, most of them conscripts from Bavaria and Saxony, who never asked to be stationed on this frozen rock. Good soldiers doing their duty. Is their duty worth dying for fish oil? He thinks of his wife in Munich, of his daughter who just turned 6. He thinks of the pour le mérite his grandfather earned in the Great War, of family honor and military tradition. Then he thinks of being incinerated in a factory explosion, in a meaningless skirmish in a war that's already spiraling beyond anyone's control. "How do I know you won't blow the factory with my men still inside?" Fisher asks. Young gestures with his free hand toward the loading door. "We're commandos, not murderers. You evacuate your people, we place our charges, everyone walks away. The factory goes up after we're all clear." Fisher considers this, weighing options, calculating odds. Outside, he can hear more British forces arriving. Heavy boots, shouted orders, the distinctive Scottish accent of someone who sounds like he's in command. Major Jack Churchill kicks open the main entrance with his sword drawn and his bagpipes slung across his back, presenting possibly the most surreal sight these German and British soldiers have witnessed in their entire military careers. He takes in the scene instantly, his men in defensive positions, Germans across the factory floor, everyone tense but not shooting. "Well," Churchill says cheerfully, "isn't this cozy? Corporal Young, what's the situation?" Young explains rapidly while keeping his eyes on Fisher. Churchill listens, then walks calmly into the middle of the factory floor, completely exposed, sword tip resting on the concrete. "Lieutenant," he says in flawless German, "I am Major Jack Churchill, and I'm offering you honorable terms. Evacuate your men, we destroy the factory, nobody else dies today. Or we can do this the hard way, which involves considerable unpleasantness for all concerned." Fisher stares at this madman with a medieval sword and bagpipes who speaks German like a Berlin aristocrat. "You are serious? You would let us go?" "Perfectly serious," Churchill replies. "This factory is our objective, not killing Germans for sport. You've fought well, but your position is untenable. The town is taken, your reinforcements won't arrive in time, and the Royal Navy is turning your artillery positions into landscaping. There's no shame in accepting reality." Fisher looks at his men again, sees the hope in their eyes, the desperate desire to survive this nightmare. Military pride wars with practical necessity. Pride loses. 15 minutes, Fisher says finally. "We need 15 minutes to evacuate the workers and our wounded." Churchill sheathes his sword. "You have 10. And Lieutenant? No tricks. My men are rather good at their jobs, and considerably less diplomatic than I am." Fisher nods curtly, begins issuing orders in rapid German. His soldiers lower their weapons, begin helping the wounded, organizing the evacuation. The factory workers, Norwegian civilians who've spent months under German occupation, watch this exchange with expressions ranging from confusion to cautious hope. Tommy Greer lowers his Thompson, hardly believing what he's witnessing. "Sir," he whispers to Young, "are we really just letting them walk?" Young finally removes his thumb from the grenade pin, carefully replacing the safety clip. "We're here to destroy the factory, Private. If we can do that without killing 30 men who can't change the outcome anyway, that's what we do. Besides," he adds with grim humor, "I really didn't fancy being blown up before breakfast." The evacuation proceeds with surprising orderliness. German soldiers help their wounded comrades toward the exits, Norwegian factory workers gather their belongings, and British Commandos maintain overwatch positions, while Major Churchill supervises with the air of a man conducting a garden party. One of the German medics, a young sanitator named Weber, pauses near Young. "Thank you," he says in broken English, for stopping." Young nods uncomfortably. War makes strange bedfellows, creates odd moments of humanity in oceans of brutality. By 5:08 hours, the factory is empty except for British Commandos and demolition equipment. Lieutenant Herbert arrives with additional men and explosives, blocks of TNT, primer cord, detonators with long fuses. "I hear you negotiated a peaceful settlement," Herbert says to Young with barely suppressed amusement. "Very civilized. Now let's blow this place to kingdom come." The demolition work begins immediately. Every support column receives charges, the main storage tanks are rigged with special care, and the chemical processing equipment gets its own dedicated explosives. They're not just destroying the factory, they're ensuring it can never be rebuilt or salvaged. Private Greer finds himself placing charges on the 3rd floor, looking out through a shattered window at South Vogsoy below. The town is wrecked, buildings burning, streets littered with debris and bodies. Dawn is beginning to break over the mountains to the east, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seem obscene given the destruction below. He can see the harbor where they landed. Was that only an hour ago? It feels like a lifetime. The German sentry they neutralized at the dock, silent and invisible, until hands emerged from darkness. The phrase that intelligence officers used in their briefings, Approach without detection. Strike without warning. Greer! Corporal Young's voice snaps him back to the present. Stop sightseeing and finish that charge. We're on the clock. Greer returns to work, winding primer cord with practiced efficiency. Around him, the factory is being transformed into the world's most elaborate firework. Every wire, every charge is placed with precision. This isn't destruction for its own sake. This is sending a message to every German garrison from Norway to Greece. Nowhere is safe, no target is beyond reach, the British are coming. By 05:25 hours, the demolition is complete. The commandos file out of the factory, unspooling wire as they go, creating distance between themselves and what's about to become a very large crater. Major Churchill does a final walkthrough, checking charges with an expert eye. He's been blowing things up since before most of these young soldiers were born, and he takes professional pride in his work. Satisfied, he emerges into the cold morning air where his men are waiting. All clear? Lieutenant Herbert asks. Churchill nods. All clear. Best move the lads back another 50 meters, though. This one's going to be spectacular. They retreat to a safe distance, taking positions behind stone walls and overturned vehicles. In the growing daylight, they can see Lieutenant Fischer and his men watching from a hillside 400 meters away. The Germans have stopped, unable to resist witnessing the destruction of what they'd been ordered to defend. Corporal Young handles the detonator, the same one he used on the first warehouse a lifetime ago. On your order, sir, he says to Churchill. The major checks his watch. 05:29 hours. Right on schedule. He looks at the factory, at the town beyond, at the men who've fought and bled to reach this moment. Then he looks at Young and smiles. Make it so, Corporal. Young twists the handle. For a fraction of a second, nothing happens. Then the Ferta factory erupts like a volcano. The main charges detonate simultaneously, sending the building's support structure flying outward. The chemical tanks go next, adding fuel-air explosions that create mushroom clouds of orange flame. Secondary explosions follow as stored materials ignite, creating a chain reaction that consumes the entire structure. The blast wave hits the commandos even at their distance, a physical push that makes them stagger. The sound is beyond description, a rolling thunder that echoes off the mountains and carries across the fjord. Where the factory stood, there is now a crater in flames reaching 50 meters into the air. The heat is intense even at this distance. Bits of debris rain down like hellish snow. On the hillside, the German soldiers watch in stunned silence as months of their work, the reason for their presence on this godforsaken island, is reduced to smoking rubble in seconds. Major Churchill unslings his bagpipes. Right then, he announces, I think that deserves a tune. And as dawn breaks fully over Vogsoy, as fires burn and men tend their wounds and count their dead, Mad Jack Churchill plays The Road to the Isles on his bagpipes while the Ferta factory burns behind him. December 27, 1941, 0627 hours. Norwegian Sea, 15 miles northwest of Vogsoy. The alarm bells aboard HMS Kenya shatter what little peace the exhausted commandos have found. Men who moments ago collapsed onto the deck now scramble for cover as the cruiser's crew races to action stations. The ship's Bofors anti-aircraft guns traverse skyward, crews loading shells with practiced urgency. Aboard the destroyer Onslow, lookouts scan the dawn sky with mounting tension. The Luftwaffe is coming, and everyone aboard the British vessels knows what that means. Private Tommy Greer presses himself against a bulkhead as sailors rush past, the organized chaos of naval combat preparations flowing around him like water around a stone. He's fought through a burning town, destroyed an armored car, survived hours of close-quarters combat, but this helplessness, this waiting for bombs to fall while trapped aboard a ship with nowhere to run, fills him with a different kind of terror. At least in South Vogsoy he could shoot back. Here, he's cargo. There, a lookout's cry cuts through the controlled pandemonium. Aircraft bearing 045 Angels 12. Captain Caslan raises his binoculars, tracking where the lookout points. Against the brightening sky, he counts them. 15 aircraft, probably Heinkel. He-111 bombers from Luftflotte 5 based out of Trondheim. They're in formation, professional, coming in high where their bomb runs will be more accurate. Caslan's jaw tightens. Kenya is a big target, and these waters are too confined for elaborate evasive maneuvers. All guns free fire when in range, Caslan orders. Engine room, prepare for evasive action on my command. Radio room, signal all ships, air attack imminent, take evasive action. The acknowledgments come rapid fire. HMS Kenya is a town-class cruiser, 900 souls aboard, and every one of them now depends on the skill of their captain and the accuracy of their gunners. On the deck, Corporal Young finds himself crouched beside Major Churchill, who seems utterly unconcerned by the approaching bombers. The Major has produced a cigarette from somewhere and is smoking calmly while watching the sky. "First time under air attack, Corporal?" Churchill asks conversationally. Young, who's been through hell on land but never aboard ship under bombing, nods tensely. "Try to enjoy it," Churchill advises with a slight smile. "You're about to witness naval gunnery at its finest, or its most spectacular failure. Either way, quite a show." The Heinkels separate into 3 groups of 5, setting up for coordinated bomb runs from different angles. It's textbook Luftwaffe doctrine. Saturate the target area. Make evasion impossible. Guarantee hits. The lead aircraft begins its approach, dropping from 12,000 feet to 8,000, the altitude where German bomb sites work best. In the Heinkel's nose, the bombardier peers through his optical sight, making minute adjustments as HMS Kenya grows larger in his crosshairs. Kenya's main armament, 6-inch guns designed for surface combat, can't elevate high enough to engage the bombers. But her secondary armament, the 4-inch anti-aircraft guns and the Bofors 40mm cannons, open fire with a thunder that makes the deck plates vibrate. Shells burst in the sky like black flowers, creating a curtain of shrapnel through which the German bombers must fly. Tracer rounds from the Bofors draw bright lines through the morning air, a lethal geometry of fire. The lead Heinkel enters the flak barrage and immediately starts taking hits. Shrapnel tears through its port wing, shredding aluminum skin. The bomber shudders but maintains course. These are experienced crews, veterans of the Norwegian campaign and the Battle of Britain. The bombardier ignores the impacts, focuses on his sight, makes his calculations. Distance, wind speed, altitude, the cruiser's speed and heading. His finger hovers over the release mechanism. "Hard to port," Captain Caslan roars. HMS Kenya heels over as her rudder bites, 30,000 tons of steel and men throwing themselves into a sharp turn. The maneuver comes at the precise instant the German bombardier releases his payload. 5 500-pound bombs tumble from the Heinkel's belly, their trajectory calculated for where the cruiser was heading. But Caslan's turn has changed the equation. The bombs impact the water 50 meters from Kenya's port beam, throwing up massive geysers that drench the deck but do no damage. The wounded Heinkel tries to climb away, trailing smoke. Kenya's gunners track it, pouring fire into the damaged bomber. The range is closing, 6,000 yards, 5,000, and then a Bofors round finds the bomber's fuel tank. The Heinkel detonates in mid-air, a ball of orange flame that rains burning debris across the sea. 5 German airmen die instantly, their war ending in fire and fragmentation over the Norwegian Sea. "One down," someone shouts, but there's no time for celebration. The second wave of Heinkels is already beginning their runs, and these pilots have learned from the first group's failure. They're coming in lower, 3,000 feet, accepting increased risk from flak in exchange for better accuracy. Caslan orders evasive maneuvers, Kenya weaving like a destroyer despite her size. But in these confined waters, there's only so much ocean to use. Lieutenant Herbert watches from his position near the forward turret, mentally calculating trajectories and probabilities with the cold mathematics that combat demands. The bombers are good, their formation tight, their approach professional. Kenya's gunners are better, filling the sky with steel, but it only takes one bomb in the wrong place to end everything. He thinks about his wife in Surrey, about the letter he wrote before the raid that waits in his locker. The letter that begins, "If you're reading this." The second wave releases in near-perfect synchronization. 15 bombs falling toward the British force. HMS Onslow, nimbler than the cruiser, throws herself into a violent turn that heels her nearly onto her beam ends. The bombs miss by meters. HMS Kenya isn't so fortunate. Caslan's evasive maneuver is perfect, but physics and geometry are unforgiving. 2 bombs miss to port, 2 to starboard, but the fifth is dead on target for the cruiser's stern. Time seems to slow as the bomb falls. Crew members who see it coming have perhaps 2 seconds to process their mortality. Corporal Young watches the dark shape grow larger, realizes with crystalline clarity that he's about to die, and finds himself thinking about his mother's face. Major Churchill takes a final drag on his cigarette. Captain Caslan grips the bridge railing, refusing to flinch. Tommy Greer closes his eyes and thinks of Glasgow. The bomb hits HMS Kenya's stern at terminal velocity, punching through the wooden deck and detonating in a compartment that, by sheer blind luck, contains nothing more vital than spare rope and paint supplies. The explosion is still massive, ripping a hole in the cruiser's hull, killing 6 sailors instantly and wounding a dozen more. The stern lifts from the water with the force of the blast, then crashes back down. Damage control klaxons shriek. Water rushes into the breached compartment. But the ship survives. "Damage report," Caslan snaps, his voice steady despite the chaos. The reports come in over the next minute. Flooding contained, 6 dead, 12 wounded, port steering engine damaged but secondary systems operational. The cruiser can still make 20 knots, still fight, still get her human cargo home. It could have been so much worse. 1 meter forward and the bomb would have hit the engine room. 1 meter to starboard, and it might have reached the magazine. Sometimes in war, luck matters as much as skill. The third wave of Heinkels is approaching, but they're facing a curtain of fire that's grown even more intense as every gun aboard Kenya and Onslow fires at maximum rate. The sky is black with flak, the sea churned white by falling shrapnel. 2 more German bombers go down, one exploding spectacularly, the other spinning into the sea with smoke pouring from both engines. The remaining aircraft break off their attack runs early, dropping their bombs wild, preservation instinct overriding training. The bombs impact harmlessly in the ocean, nowhere near the British ships. By 0647 hours, the surviving Luftwaffe bombers are heading back to Trondheim. Their formations broken, their confidence shattered. They've lost 5 aircraft, 50 men, for 1 hit on a cruiser that's still underway and dangerous. In the twisted mathematics of air-sea warfare, this is a British victory. Aboard HMS Kenya, the guns fall silent, crews exhausted, ears ringing. The commandos emerge from cover, checking themselves for injuries that come from nowhere. Shrapnel wounds, concussion trauma, the random violence of explosions. Sergeant Major Daly finds his section clustered near a lifeboat station, all present, all alive. Though Private Harrison has lost consciousness from blood loss and needs immediate medical attention. "Get him to sickbay," Daly orders, and 2 men carry Harrison below. The rest sit in stunned silence, processing what they've just experienced. They've fought through a town, destroyed a factory, survived close-quarters combat, and nearly died to a bomb dropped from 3,000 feet by a pilot they never saw. Captain Durnford Slater makes his way through the ship, checking on his men, counting heads, assessing the psychological toll of the raid and its aftermath. He finds Churchill on the deck, calmly lighting another cigarette despite regulations against smoking during combat operations. "Quite the morning, Jack," Durnford Slater observes. Churchill grins through a face blackened with smoke and grime. "Best entertainment I've had since we took the Litani River Bridge, though I do wish they'd given us more warning about the aerial entertainment." Below decks, in the cramped sickbay, German and British wounded lie side by side, tended by the same overworked medical staff. Obergefreiter Ritter, the first sentry, the one who never saw his attacker coming, is conscious now, his head bandaged, his pride wounded more than his body. Next to him lies a British commando with a shrapnel wound in his shoulder. They don't speak, separated by language and loyalty, but they exchange glances that communicate something deeper than words. We survived. Against all odds, despite everything, we survived. December 28, 1941. 14:30 hours. Scapa Flow, Orkney Islands, Scotland. HMS Kenya limps into Scapa Flow with a hole in her stern and a deck full of men who've seen the face of modern warfare. The great natural harbor, Britain's primary naval base, spreads before them. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, the floating steel fortress that guards the home islands. As Kenya drops anchor, word of Operation Archery has already spread through the fleet. Sailors line the rails of nearby vessels, watching the commandos disembark, seeing the bandaged men, the body bags being carefully transferred to waiting ambulances, the hollow-eyed 1,000-yard stares of soldiers who've been through hell. Private Tommy Greer descends the gangway on legs that feel like rubber, his Thompson cradled in arms that still shake with adrenaline and exhaustion. Behind him comes Corporal Young, then Lieutenant Herbert, then the rest of No. 3 Commando, or what remains of them. They've left 17 men behind in Norway, buried in temporary graves or lost in the chaos of combat. The men who return are different from the ones who departed 48 hours ago. Combat does that, strips away illusions and replaces them with hard-won knowledge written in blood and fire. Major Churchill is the last to leave the ship, pausing at the gangway to salute Captain Caslon on the bridge. The naval officer returns it crisply. They've shared something few men experience: combat against overwhelming odds, the partnership of different services united by common purpose. "Thank you for the lift, Captain," Churchill calls up, his voice carrying across the water. "Next time, perhaps we could skip the aerial fireworks?" Caslon manages a tired smile. "Next time, Major, come during better weather." At the harbor's edge, Captain Durnford Slater finds Admiral Sir John Tovey waiting, Commander-in-Chief of the Home Fleet, the man whose ships made this raid possible. Tovey is a stern figure, old-school Royal Navy, but his eyes hold something approaching admiration as he watches the commandos file past. "Well done, Captain," Tovey says quietly. "Combined Operations is already calling it the most successful raid of the war. The Prime Minister himself wants a full briefing." Durnford Slater feels the weight of those words, success. But he's thinking about the 17 men who won't return, about Private Harrison who died from blood loss during the voyage home, about the German soldiers they killed who were just doing their duty. "We accomplished the objectives, sir," he replies carefully. "Whether that constitutes success, I suppose history will judge." Tovey studies him for a moment, recognizing the voice of a man who's seen combat's true face. History will remember that British forces struck deep into occupied Norway, destroyed vital enemy infrastructure, and proved that Hitler's Atlantic Wall is nothing but propaganda. That's worth something, Captain. In the hastily erected debriefing tents, intelligence officers from Combined Operations Headquarters descend on the returning commandos like hungry ravens. They want everything: tactical observations, German defensive positions, types of weapons encountered, response times, civilian attitudes. The intelligence harvest from Vogsoy is extraordinary. Documents captured from the administrative building detailed German supply chains across Norway. The prisoners, particularly Lieutenant Fischer, provide information about garrison strengths and morale that will prove invaluable for future operations. Fischer sits in an interrogation room, facing a British intelligence officer who speaks fluent German and knows exactly which questions to ask. "Tell me about the approach," the officer says. "When did your men first become aware of the attack?" Fischer's answer is slow, reluctant but honest. "We didn't. Not until they were already ashore, already among us. Your men moved like ghosts. Ritter, our sentry, he was one of our best. He never even got off a shot. One moment he was on watch, the next he was unconscious. How do you train men to do that?" The intelligence officer makes notes but doesn't answer. The truth is that No. 3 Commando has spent 8 months training for exactly this kind of operation. Night approach in small boats, silent movement, close quarters battle. They've practiced until it's instinctive, until they can navigate in complete darkness using only touch and sound, until they can kill efficiently and without hesitation. It's a new kind of warfare, and the Germans are only beginning to understand what they're facing. In another tent, a medical officer examines Tommy Greer, checking for wounds the young private might not have noticed in the heat of combat. Greer sits on an examination table, still in his filthy uniform, his face a mask of exhaustion. "Any pain?" the doctor asks. "Anywhere you were hit?" Greer shakes his head, though everything hurts. His shoulders from the weapon's recoil, his legs from the running, his head from the explosions. But these are the aches of survival, not injury. "I'm fine, sir," he says, "just tired." The doctor nods, making notes. "You'll be debriefed later today, then 72 hours leave. Use it to rest, Private. Don't try to be a hero." But Greer is already a hero, though he doesn't know it yet. His destruction of the German armored car has made it into official reports. His silent approach during the initial landing, his actions inside the factory, these stories are spreading through the commando community, becoming legend before the ink on the after-action reports is dry. Sergeant Major Daly sits alone in a tent, writing letters to the families of men who won't be coming home. It's the worst part of command, worse than combat itself. "Dear Mrs. Harrison, it is my sad duty to inform you." The words come hard, fighting through exhaustion and grief. He remembers Harrison's face when they found him alive on that street, the determination in the wounded man's eyes, the way he refused to slow them down despite his injury. Good soldiers make it harder, not easier. Not. Outside, the December afternoon is fading toward another long northern night. Across Scapa Flow, normal naval routine resumes, ships taking on fuel and supplies, crews drilling, the endless cycle of preparation and maintenance that keeps the Royal Navy operational. But something has changed. The raid on Vogsoy has proved a concept that many in the traditional military establishment doubted. Specially trained troops, operating in small units with surgical precision, can achieve objectives that conventional forces cannot. In Berlin, the after-action reports from Norway are landing on desks with the force of artillery shells. The Kriegsmarine is furious that British ships penetrated so deep into coastal waters. The Luftwaffe is making excuses for losing 5 bombers. The Wehrmacht is trying to explain how a garrison of nearly 200 men was defeated by a force 1/3 its size. But the most concerning reports come from the frontline commanders, men like Hauptmann Weber and Feldwebel Hoffmann who survived the assault. Weber's report, dictated from a hospital bed where he's recovering from shrapnel wounds, contains phrases that make uncomfortable reading for German high command. "Enemy appeared without warning. Silent approach negated our early warning systems. Fought with extraordinary aggression and coordination. Our defensive positions proved inadequate against such tactics." The report goes up the chain of command, eventually reaching the desk of Adolf Hitler himself. The Führer's response is predictably volcanic: demands for improved coastal defenses, threats of retaliation, orders to expand garrison sizes across Norway. But Hitler's rage cannot change the fundamental equation that Operation Archery has revealed. Nowhere on the occupied coast is truly safe. From Norway to France, from Denmark to the Netherlands, German commanders now sleep less soundly, knowing that British commandos might materialize from the darkness at any moment. It's psychological warfare at its finest, and it's working. In London, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, no relation to Mad Jack, reads the preliminary reports from Vogsoy with satisfaction that he doesn't bother to hide. This is exactly the aggressive action he's been demanding, proof that Britain can strike back despite being driven from the continent. He dictates a message to be read to the returning commandos. The raid on Vogsoy is a model of combined operations and a portent of things to come. You have shown the enemy that British arms can reach him anywhere, at any time. Well done. Back at Scapa Flow, as darkness falls and the returning raiders finally get hot food and the prospect of sleep, Corporal Young finds himself standing on a dock, looking out across the water toward Norway. Somewhere across that dark sea lies South Vogsoy, a smoking ruin that will never fully recover. Somewhere out there are graves being dug for German soldiers who died defending a fish oil factory. Somewhere out there, Lieutenant Fischer's family in Munich is about to receive a telegram saying their son is missing, presumed captured. Thinking deep thoughts, Corporal? Major Churchill has appeared beside him, silent as ever despite his bagpipes and sword. Young doesn't startle. He's learned to sense presence in darkness, a skill that might keep him alive in future operations. Just wondering if it was worth it, sir. All those dead men for a factory. Churchill is quiet for a long moment, considering his answer carefully. The factory is glycerin for German explosives, Churchill says finally. Every bomb that won't be made because we destroyed that facility is a British life saved. Maybe a child in London who won't die in an air raid. Maybe a soldier at the front who won't face that particular shell. The mathematics of war are cruel, Corporal, but they're inescapable. We trade lives in Norway to save lives at home. Is it worth it? Ask the people who survive because of what we did. It's a hard answer, the kind that doesn't satisfy but has the virtue of honesty. Young nods slowly, accepting if not fully embracing the logic. And the way we did it, sir? The silent approach, the night attack? That felt, I don't know, different. Churchill smiles in the darkness. That's because it is different. We're writing new rules for warfare, showing that small units with proper training can achieve what armies cannot. The Germans are going to study what happened at Vogsoy for years, trying to understand how we did it, and while they're studying, we'll be doing it again, and again, until either we win or they learn to stop us. In the distance, church bells ring across Orkney, marking evening services. The sound carries across the water, peaceful and incongruous after days of gunfire and explosions. The men of No. 3 Commando are settling in for their first night back in Britain, sleeping in warm beds for the first time in what feels like forever. Some will sleep peacefully. Others will wake screaming from nightmares where German sentries appear from darkness, where bombs fall eternally, where friends die over and over in infinite variations. This is the true cost of Operation Archery. Not just the 17 dead, but the invisible wounds carried by the survivors. Yet they will volunteer again when the next operation is announced, because that's what commandos do. They've seen the face of modern special operations warfare, and they've proven it works. From this frozen December raid on a Norwegian fishing town, a legend is born. The legend of British Commandos who could appear from nowhere, strike like thunder, and vanish like ghosts. In the German barracks at what remains of South Vogsoy, the survivors tell and retell their stories, each repetition adding details, transforming memory into myth. The British became more numerous in the telling, their approach more impossible, their fighting more superhuman. They came out of the darkness itself, one soldier swears. No sound, no warning. Like ghosts. The story spreads along the coast, from garrison to garrison, growing with each telling. And in the growing, it achieves something more valuable than any tactical objective. It plants seeds of fear in the hearts of every German soldier stationed on the Atlantic Wall. The raid on Vogsoy lasted less than 3 hours. Its effects will last for the remainder of the war.